The red dust of Kepler 442b swirled around Dr. Rachel Morgan's boots as she checked her scanner one more time. Something was wrong. The readings showed massive energy fluctuations coming from the canyon ahead, and that wasn't supposed to happen in this sector. This was supposed to be a routine geological survey, the kind she'd done 100 times before on a dozen different worlds. Rachel had been working on this mining colony for 3 years now. She knew the rules better than anyone. Rule number 1, the big one, the one they drilled into every newcomer's head during orientation: stay away from the dragons. That's what the miners called them anyway. The official reports used the term indigenous aerial megafauna, but nobody actually said that. They were dragons, plain and simple. Massive winged creatures that lived in the mountain ranges, hunting in packs and generally keeping to themselves. The colony and the dragons had an understanding. Humans mined in the valleys, dragons stayed in the peaks. Nobody bothered anybody. It had worked for 5 years without incident. Until today. Rachel climbed over the rocky ridge and looked down into the canyon. Her breath caught in her throat. There, tangled in a mess of cables and nets, was a dragon. A young one, maybe the size of a small aircraft, with scales that shimmered between blue and silver in the harsh sunlight. The nets crackled with electricity, the kind used in illegal poaching operations. She'd heard rumors about poachers working the outer colonies, but she'd never seen evidence before. The dragon was dying. She could see that from here. Its wings were twisted at wrong angles, membranes torn and bleeding. Burns covered its body where the electrified nets had made contact. And it was moving, thrashing weakly against the restraints, each movement causing the nets to tighten and burn deeper. Rachel's radio crackled. "Rachel, what's your status?" "You've been radio silent for 20 minutes. She pressed the button. "I found something. Canyon 7. You need to see this." 20 minutes later, her survey team stood at the ridge, looking down at the trapped dragon. Tom, her crew chief, shook his head. "We need to report this and move on. This isn't our problem." "It's suffering," Rachel said quietly. "It's a wild animal," Tom replied. "A dangerous one. Command will send a containment team. By the time they get here, it'll be dead." Tom turned to look at her. "Rachel, I know what you're thinking. Don't. We have protocols for a reason. Those things can tear through steel plating. Their breath weapon can melt rock. We are not equipped to handle this." The rest of the team nodded in agreement. They wanted to leave. Rachel understood their fear. She'd seen the safety videos, watched footage of dragons hunting. They were apex predators on this world, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. But she'd also seen the intelligence in their eyes when they flew overhead. The way they seemed to watch the human settlement with curiosity rather than aggression. And right now, looking at that young dragon struggling in the nets, all she could see was terror. "You guys go back," Rachel said. "Report it. I'll stay and monitor the situation until help arrives." "That's against protocol," Tom said. "So is leaving a dying creature without observation. What if it escapes before containment gets here? Someone needs to keep eyes on it." Tom didn't look happy, but he knew she had a point. "Fine. But you stay on the ridge. Do not approach it. We'll be back with a containment team in 2 hours maximum." Rachel nodded. The team left, their footsteps fading into the distance. She sat down on a rock and watched the dragon. It had stopped thrashing now, its breathing shallow and rapid. Every few minutes it would try to move, then collapse again. An hour passed. Then another. Rachel knew the containment team would be armed. They'd probably put the dragon down as a mercy. It was the practical choice. The safe choice. She looked at her water bottle, then at the dragon. Its tongue hung from its mouth, and even from this distance, she could see it was dehydrated. The twin suns of this system were brutal, and the dragon had been trapped here for hours, maybe longer. Rachel stood up. This was stupid. This was dangerous. This went against everything she'd been taught. She climbed down into the canyon. The dragon's eye opened as she approached. It was the color of molten gold, with a slit pupil that tracked her movement. The creature tried to thrash again, but it was too weak. It could only watch as she got closer, step by careful step. Rachel stopped 10 feet away. The dragon's eye was locked on her, and she could see the rapid pulse in its neck. It was terrified. Not angry, not aggressive. Just scared. She knelt down in the red dust, making herself smaller, less threatening. She set her water bottle on the ground and pushed it toward the dragon with a pole. The creature flinched violently, the net sparking. "Easy," Rachel said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you. I promise." The dragon didn't understand her words, but something in her tone must have registered. Its breathing slowed slightly. Rachel stayed kneeling. She didn't move closer. She just stayed there at eye level with the creature and kept talking in that same soft voice. You're safe now. I know you're scared. I know you're hurting. But I'm going to help you. I promise. The dragon's golden eye never left her face. And for the first time since she'd arrived, it stopped trying to escape. It just watched her, this strange small creature who knelt in the dust and spoke in gentle tones. Something had changed between them in that moment. Rachel felt it, and somehow she knew the dragon felt it too. This was the beginning of something the galaxy had never seen before. Rachel didn't sleep that first night. She couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those golden eyes watching her, filled with pain and fear. The containment team had come and gone, taking one look at the situation and declaring it too dangerous to approach in the dark. They'd be back at dawn with heavy equipment and authorization to terminate if necessary. That gave her 12 hours. She'd sent a message to her supervisor explaining she was staying to monitor the situation. Technically, it wasn't against any rules. Stupid maybe, but not illegal. She'd set up a small camp on the canyon floor, close enough to see the dragon but far enough to give it space. The creature she'd started calling Flint because of the way its scales sparked in the light hadn't moved much. Its breathing was steadier now after she'd managed to get some water near enough for it to drink. That had taken 3 hours of slowly pushing a container closer, inch by inch, while speaking in low, calm tones. As the twin suns rose over the canyon rim, Rachel made a decision. She couldn't let them kill this creature. Not when she'd seen that spark of intelligence in its eyes. Not when it had chosen to trust her enough to stop fighting. She approached the net slowly, talking the entire time. Okay, Flint. I'm going to try something. You're not going to like it, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that? The dragon's eye tracked her movement. Its body tensed, but it didn't thrash. Rachel pulled out her cutting tool, a small plasma torch used for geological samples. I'm going to cut these nets. The problem is they're electrified. This is going to hurt for a second, but then it'll be better. I promise. She reached for the first cable. Flint's entire body went rigid, a low rumbling sound building in its chest. Rachel froze. That was a warning. She'd heard recordings of that sound before, right before dragons attacked. I know, she said softly. I know you're scared. But I'm trying to help. Please just let me help you. She kept her hand extended, not moving, just waiting. The rumbling continued for a long moment, then gradually faded. Flint's eye never left her face. Rachel took that as permission. She activated the torch and cut through the first cable. The net sparked violently and Flint roared, the sound echoing off the canyon walls. But it didn't pull away. It stayed still, trembling while Rachel worked. It took 2 hours to cut through enough of the netting to free one wing. Rachel's arms ached and she'd burned her hand twice when the nets discharged. But Flint's wing was free, hanging limp but no longer trapped. She sat back, exhausted. See? Not so bad, right? Flint made a sound, a kind of musical note that reminded Rachel of a whale song. It was different from the warning rumble, softer somehow. What's that? Rachel asked, knowing the dragon couldn't answer. Are you trying to talk to me? The dragon made the sound again, its eye still fixed on her face. Over the next several hours, as Rachel continued cutting away the nets, she noticed patterns. Flint would make certain sounds when she got close, different sounds when she moved away. When she brought water, there was a specific tone. When her tool sparked and caused pain, another tone entirely. You're talking, Rachel whispered in amazement. You're actually trying to communicate. By the time the containment team arrived, Rachel had freed most of Flint's body. The dragon was still badly injured, unable to fly, but it was no longer trapped. And it was making those musical sounds constantly now, a whole range of different tones and harmonies. The team chief, a man named David who Rachel had never liked, climbed down into the canyon with his weapon drawn. Dr. Morgan, step away from the creature. We have authorization to neutralize the threat. It's not a threat, Rachel said, not moving from her position next to Flint. And I'm not moving. That's an order, Doctor. Then you'll have to shoot through me. David raised his weapon, but before he could say anything else, Flint moved. Despite its injuries, despite barely being able to stand, the dragon positioned itself between Rachel and the armed men. Its wings, torn and burned as they were, spread wide in a protective gesture. The men backed up instinctively. One of them had his finger on the trigger. Don't shoot. Rachel shouted. Can't you see? It's protecting me. This creature understands what's happening. It knows I helped it and is trying to help me now. David lowered his weapon slightly, his eyes wide. That's not possible. They're animals. Sophisticated, sure, but still animals. Does that look like animal behavior to you? Rachel gestured at Flint, who hadn't moved from its protective stance. I've been documenting everything. The vocalizations, the responses, the clear evidence of intelligence. This creature has been trying to communicate with me for hours. One of the other team members had pulled out a camera and was recording. Rachel knew what that meant. In an age where everything could be shared across the galaxy in seconds, this footage would spread fast. David seemed to realize it too. Stand down, he ordered his team. Then to Rachel, you've got 48 hours to prove what you're claiming. After that, command makes the final call. As the team retreated back up the canyon, Rachel turned to Flint. The dragon had collapsed from the effort of standing, its breathing labored. But it was looking at her with something that looked almost like gratitude. We did it, Rachel said, gently touching Flint's scaled shoulder. For the first time the dragon didn't flinch. Now we just have to show them what I already know. That you're not just an animal. You're someone. Flint made that musical sound again, and this time Rachel tried to hum it back. The dragon's eye widened, and it made a different sound, more complex, like a question. Rachel laughed despite her exhaustion. Yeah, I'm trying to learn your language. We've got 48 hours to figure out how to talk to each other. No pressure, right? The dragon made another sound, and Rachel could have sworn it sounded almost like laughter too. She pulled out her recorder and got to work. They had a lot to accomplish and not much time to do it. But for the first time since finding Flint trapped and dying, Rachel felt hope. Real, genuine hope that maybe, just maybe, humans and dragons could find a way to understand each other. And it all started with the simple language of kindness. The video went viral in 6 hours. Rachel hadn't expected that. She'd uploaded her documentation to the colony's research database, thinking maybe a few xenobiologists would find it interesting. Instead, it spread across human space like wildfire. Within a day, over 1 billion people had watched the footage of Flint protecting her from the armed containment team. The comments section was overwhelming. People were calling Flint a hero. They were calling Rachel brave, crazy, and everything in between. But most importantly, they were asking questions. If this dragon could understand protection, could recognize kindness, could try to communicate, what did that mean about the rest of its species? Rachel was too busy to pay attention to the media storm. She had 48 hours and she'd already used up 24 of them. Flint was healing faster than she'd expected, the dragon's natural regeneration working overtime now that it had food and water. But they still hadn't managed real communication, just basic sounds and responses. That changed on the second morning. Rachel woke up to find Flint awake and watching her. The dragon made a sound, that same melodic tone it had used yesterday. Rachel, half asleep, hummed it back automatically. Flint's whole body went still. Then it made a different sound, more complex, with multiple notes woven together. Rachel sat up, suddenly wide awake. She grabbed her recorder. Okay, let's try this again. She hummed the first sound. Flint responded with a single note. Then it waited. You want me to copy you, Rachel breathed. This is a lesson. You're teaching me. For the next 3 hours, Flint patiently repeated sounds, waiting for Rachel to mimic them. Some she could manage. Others were too high or too low for her human vocal range. But slowly, painfully slowly, they were building something. A vocabulary. That's when the other dragons arrived. Rachel heard them before she saw them, the sound of massive wings cutting through the air. She looked up to see 3 adult dragons circling the canyon, each one twice the size of Flint. Her heart hammered in her chest. This was it. They'd come for their young one, and she was standing right next to it. The largest dragon landed first, its scales a deep crimson that seemed to glow in the sunlight. The other 2, one silver and one deep purple, landed on either side. All 3 were staring at Rachel with those intelligent golden eyes. Flint struggled to its feet and made a series of sounds, complex harmonies that seemed to carry meaning. The crimson dragon, which Rachel guessed was Flint's mother, listened intently. Then she turned her full attention to Rachel. The dragon spoke. There was no other word for it. She opened her mouth and produced a cascade of musical tones, some that made Rachel's bones vibrate, others so high they were almost beyond hearing. It was language, clear and unmistakable. Rachel's hands were shaking. She had no idea what had been said, but she had to try something. She hummed one of the sounds Flint had taught her, the one she thought meant friend or safe. The 3 adult dragons went completely still. Then the crimson one made a sound that was almost a gasp. She tried to speak to us, came a voice. Rachel spun around. A man was climbing down into the canyon, his hands raised to show he was unarmed. She recognized him from the colony, one of the linguists who worked in the research division. His name was Ben, and he was carrying what looked like a translation device. What are you doing here? Rachel demanded. Command sent me when the dragons showed up. This device has been analyzing all the recordings you uploaded. It's not perfect, but it can give us rough translations. He pointed the device at the Crimson Dragon. She wants to know why you helped her child. Rachel looked at the massive dragon, then at Flint, who was watching the exchange with clear interest. Because it was the right thing to do. Because Flint was hurt and scared, and no one deserves to suffer like that. Ben translated her words into harmonic tones, and the device produced a sound that made all three dragons' heads tilt in what looked like surprise. The Crimson Dragon spoke again, and Ben listened to the translation. She says that humans are strange. Other species have come to this world. The tall ones with 4 arms who wanted to study them. The blue-scaled ones who tried to negotiate territory. The machine beings who didn't acknowledge them at all. But no other species has ever helped a wounded dragon before. Why not? Rachel asked. Don't the other species have compassion? Ben translated the question. The response from the Crimson Dragon was long and complex. Ben's face grew serious as he listened. She says the others saw dragons as either resources or obstacles. The 4-armed ones wanted to collect scales and study them like specimens. The blue-scaled ones saw them as competition for resources. The machine beings didn't register them as significant at all. They all wanted something from the dragons. Trade, territory, research data. But you? Ben paused, checking the translation again. You didn't want anything. You just saw someone who needed help and you helped. She says her name is Windcaller, and she's asking what humans want in exchange for saving her son. Rachel looked at Flint, who was watching her with those golden eyes. We don't want anything. That's not how kindness works. Ben translated, and this time all 3 dragons made sounds of what Rachel could only describe as confusion. Windcaller spoke again. She's asking why you're different, Ben said. Why humans do things differently than every other species they've encountered. Rachel thought about it for a long moment. Tell her this. Humans remember what it's like to be small. We remember being afraid, being hunted, being the ones who needed help. We spent most of our history as prey animals, living in caves, running from things bigger and stronger than us. We survived because we learned to help each other, to show compassion even when it was hard, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. That's still part of who we are. Ben's voice wavered slightly as he translated. The 3 dragons were silent for a long time after the words faded. Then Flint spoke, and even without translation Rachel recognized some of the sounds. The young dragon was talking about her, describing what she'd done. How she'd stayed when others left. How she'd knelt in the dust and made herself small. How she'd spent hours cutting away the nets despite the danger. How she'd protected Flint from the armed humans. When Flint finished, Windcaller made a sound that the translator rendered as something close to understanding. She spoke directly to Rachel, and Ben's voice was soft as he translated. She says humans kneel first. Humans ask permission. Other species only take. She says her people have been hunted by poachers for cycles, and the Galactic Council has ignored their pleas because dragons are classified as non-sentient creatures. They're considered animals, so their deaths don't matter under galactic law. Rachel felt anger rising in her chest. That's wrong. Flint has been teaching me their language. They have complex communication, social structures, they understand abstract concepts like protection and gratitude. That's sentience by any reasonable definition. Then prove it, Ben said quietly. Windcaller is asking if you can prove to the galaxy what you've proven to her. That dragons deserve to be recognized as people, not animals. Rachel looked at the 3 massive dragons, then at Flint, who had nearly died in those poacher nets. She thought about every other dragon on this world, living under the threat of being hunted with no legal protection. Yes, she said firmly. I can prove it, but I'm going to need help. From all of you. Windcaller listened to the translation, then made a sound that Rachel was learning to recognize as agreement. The dragon lowered her massive head until she was eye level with Rachel, close enough that Rachel could feel the warmth of her breath. Ben translated her next words. She says dragons have asked for help before. Many times. From many species. All of them promised. None of them followed through. She wants to know what makes humans different. Why should she trust that you won't abandon them like the others did? Rachel reached out slowly and placed her hand on Windcaller's scaled snout. The dragon didn't flinch. Because we remember, Rachel said. We remember what it's like to be the ones asking for help. And we know that sometimes one person keeping their promise can change everything. 6 months. That's how long it took to get a hearing before the Galactic Council. 6 months of Rachel working 16-hour days, documenting every interaction with the dragons. 6 months of Flint teaching her the intricacies of dragon language, a communication system so complex it made human languages look simple by comparison. 6 months of building a case that would change everything. The council chamber was massive, designed to accommodate representatives from hundreds of different species. Rachel stood at the center podium, feeling incredibly small. Above her, arranged in a vast semicircle, sat the council members. Some were humanoid, others were so alien that Rachel couldn't even identify their basic anatomy. And in the gallery, watching from behind energy barriers, sat Windcaller, Flint, and a dozen other dragons who had volunteered to come. Across from Rachel stood the opposition. 3 lawyers representing the mining corporations that had been operating on Kepler 442b. Behind them sat the corporate executives, their faces cold and calculating. They had billions of credits invested in those mining operations. If dragons were declared sentient, those operations would be shut down overnight. The council's head judge, a being that looked like it was made of crystallized light, spoke in a voice that echoed through translation devices. Dr. Morgan, you have requested this emergency hearing to contest the classification of the species commonly known as dragons. You claim they possess sentience equivalent to council-recognized species. Please present your evidence. Rachel took a deep breath. She'd practiced this presentation 1,000 times. Honored council members, over the past 6 months, I have documented extensive communication with the dragon species. They possess a language system with over 3,000 distinct vocalizations, complex grammatical structures, and the ability to discuss abstract concepts including mathematics, philosophy, and art. She pulled up her first display, showing wave patterns of dragon speech. This is a conversation between Windcaller and her mate about the ethical implications of hunting behavior. They're debating whether it's right to hunt certain prey species to near extinction, and discussing conservation strategies. This is not instinct. This is moral reasoning. The corporate lawyer, a tall woman with sharp features, stood up. Objection. Dr. Morgan is interpreting animal sounds through the lens of her own bias. Many species make complex vocalizations. Birds, whales, even insects. That doesn't make them sentient. The judge gestured for Rachel to continue. Rachel pulled up another display. This is a mathematical proof, expressed in dragon harmonics. Flint, the young dragon I first encountered, taught this to me. It's a geometric concept similar to the Pythagorean theorem, but more complex. They don't just understand mathematics. They've developed their own mathematical frameworks. She showed more evidence. Dragon art, carved into canyon walls with careful precision. Historical records passed down through generations via song, detailing dragon history going back centuries. Social structures with designated roles, dispute resolution systems, even something resembling courts where dragons judged the actions of their peers. The presentation went on for 3 hours. By the end, even some of the skeptical council members looked convinced. But the corporate lawyers weren't done. Dr. Morgan, the lead lawyer said, his voice dripping with condescension. You've shown us impressive data. But let's be honest about what this really is. You spent 6 months with these creatures. You formed an emotional attachment. You're projecting human qualities onto sophisticated animal behavior. It's a phenomenon well documented in xenobiology. Humans have a tendency to anthropomorphize anything that shows even basic intelligence. Rachel felt her temper rising, but she kept her voice calm. I'm not projecting anything. The evidence speaks for itself. Does it? The lawyer pulled up his own display. These are recordings of trained animals from dozens of worlds. All of them can be taught to respond to commands, to perform complex tasks, even to appear to communicate. That doesn't make them sentient. You've simply trained these dragons to mimic behaviors that look like intelligence. Before Rachel could respond, something unexpected happened. Flint stood up in the gallery. The energy barrier that separated the observers from the proceedings was designed to allow sound through, and Flint's voice rang out clear and strong. The dragon spoke in harmonics, a long complex statement that the translation devices struggled to process. But Rachel understood. She'd been learning dragon language for 6 months, and while she couldn't speak it perfectly, she could understand most of it. He's speaking for himself, Rachel said, her voice shaking. He's telling the council that he's not trained, not mimicking. He's explaining that dragons have watched humans for years, confused by why we were different from other species. He's saying that when he was trapped and dying, he thought his life was over. Then a human did something no other species had ever done. I helped without asking for anything in return. The lawyer tried to interrupt, but the judge held up a hand for silence. Flint continued speaking, and the translation devices finally caught up, broadcasting his words throughout the chamber. We have language. We have history. We have art and mathematics and philosophy. We debate right and wrong. We love our children. We mourn our dead. We are not animals. We are people. And we are tired of being treated as resources to be harvested. The chamber erupted in noise. Some council members were shocked, others were arguing. The corporate lawyers were shouting objections. And then something happened that no one expected. A shot rang out. Not a sound most species would recognize, but Rachel knew it instantly. Plasma fire. Time seemed to slow down. Rachel saw the bolt of energy screaming toward her, saw the corporate executive in the back holding a weapon. She couldn't move fast enough. She was going to die. Flint moved faster than should have been possible. The dragon leaped over the energy barrier, wings spread wide despite the limited space. He crashed into Rachel, knocking her aside, and took the plasma bolt directly in his chest. The dragon collapsed, smoke rising from the wound. Rachel scrambled to his side, her hands shaking as she tried to assess the damage. It was bad. The plasma had burned straight through his scales, the kind of wound that could kill even a dragon. And then something beautiful happened. Every human in the gallery stood up. Not just a few. Every single one. Security guards, observers, junior diplomats, maintenance workers who had stopped to watch the proceedings. They moved as one, rushing down from the gallery, forming a circle around Rachel and Flint. A living shield of human bodies, protecting the fallen dragon. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They just stood there, shoulder to shoulder, between Flint and anyone who might want to finish what the assassin had started. And they began to sing. It started with one voice, a woman Rachel didn't know, singing an old Earth song about loss and hope. Another voice joined, then another. Within moments, all the humans were singing together, a harmony of dozens of different voices creating something greater than the sum of its parts. Windcaller and the other dragons in the gallery began to sing too. Their harmonics wove through the human melody, creating a sound that had never existed before in the galaxy. Two species, completely different, singing together in shared grief and defiance. The council chamber fell silent except for that song. Rachel looked down at Flint, tears streaming down her face. The dragon's golden eyes were half closed, but he was still breathing. Barely. "Get a medical team," she shouted. "Please, someone help him." The crystalline judge spoke, its voice cutting through the singing. "Human medical team and dragon healers, report to the chamber floor immediately. Security, arrest the assailant." It paused, looking at the circle of humans still protecting Flint. "And let it be entered into the record that this council has witnessed something unprecedented. Two species, in spontaneous cooperation, demonstrating the very definition of sapient behavior. Compassion across species lines. Sacrifice for another. The formation of bonds that transcend biology." The judge's crystalline form seemed to glow brighter. "This council recognizes dragon sentience, effective immediately. Let the record show that the decision was influenced not by data alone, but by the actions witnessed here today. Both human and dragon have proven beyond doubt that intelligence is not merely the capacity for language or mathematics. It is the capacity for love, for sacrifice, for standing together against injustice." Medical teams rushed in, both human and dragon healers working together to stabilize Flint. Rachel held the young dragon's head in her lap, whispering the same words she'd said 6 months ago in that canyon. "You're safe now. I promise. You're safe." But even as relief washed over her about the council's decision, Rachel knew this wasn't over. The corporations wouldn't accept this quietly. The real fight was just beginning. Flint survived. The combination of human medical technology and dragon natural healing saved his life, though the doctor said it was close. Too close. Rachel spent 3 days in the medical center, refusing to leave his side until he woke up. When those golden eyes finally opened and focused on her face, she cried harder than she'd cried in years. But there was no time to celebrate. The galaxy was about to explode. The Council's recognition of dragon sentience sent shockwaves through every corner of known space. Mining operations on Kepler 442b were immediately suspended pending investigation. The corporations lost billions of credits overnight. And they were furious. Within a week, the corporate alliance issued an ultimatum. Either the Council reversed its decision, or they would take matters into their own hands. They had private military forces, fleets of warships, and resources that dwarfed most planetary governments. The dragons were sitting on some of the richest mineral deposits in the galaxy, and the corporations weren't going to let a sentience ruling stand between them and profit. The Council tried to negotiate, but the corporations weren't interested in talking. They wanted their mining rights back, and they didn't care how many dragons had to die to make that happen. That's when humanity did something crazy. Earth's government issued a statement that made every news feed in the galaxy. Every human colony in Council space, all 47 of them, declared themselves sanctuary territories for dragons. Any dragon seeking refuge would be welcomed, protected, and given full citizenship rights. It was an unprecedented move. Humanity was barely a minor player in galactic politics, having only joined the Council 20 years ago. They had no real power, no significant military, no economic leverage. But they had something else. They had conviction. Rachel watched the announcement from the medical center, Flint resting beside her. The human ambassador to the Council, an older man named Director Hayes, stood before the cameras with Wind Caller beside him. The corporations have asked what gives humanity the right to interfere, Hayes said, his voice steady and strong. I'll tell you what gives us the right. Common decency. Basic morality. The fundamental understanding that some things matter more than profit. Dragons are people. They have families, cultures, histories. And we will not stand by while they're slaughtered for the minerals beneath their homes. The corporate alliance responded with threats. They would blockade human colonies. They would cut off trade. They would use military force if necessary. Hayes's response was simple. Then you'll have to go through us first. It should have been suicide. The human defense fleet consisted of maybe 200 ships, outdated by galactic standards. The corporate alliance had thousands of vessels, all state-of-the-art. It wasn't even a fair fight. But humanity had learned something during their short time in galactic politics. Wars aren't just fought with weapons. They're fought with information, with public opinion, with hearts and minds. Within hours of the corporate threats, human media networks began broadcasting dragon culture across every available channel. Musicians collaborating with dragons to create fusion harmonics that captivated billions of listeners. Artists showcasing dragon canyon carvings that rivaled any gallery in the galaxy. Philosophers discussing dragon ethical frameworks that had existed for centuries before humans even left Earth. The humans made dragons impossible to ignore, impossible to dismiss as mere animals. They made the galaxy fall in love with dragon culture, dragon art, dragon music. And then they made it personal. They broadcast Flint's story. The young dragon trapped and dying, saved by a single human who refused to walk away. The healing process, the language lessons, the moment Flint threw himself in front of a plasma bolt to save Rachel's life. They showed every second of footage, backed by interviews with Rachel explaining why she'd done it. Because it was right, she said to the camera, Flint's head resting against her shoulder. Because someone needed help and I could give it. Because that's what humans do. We remember what it's like to be small and scared and hoping someone will care enough to help. And we refuse to become the kind of species that looks away when others are suffering. The footage went viral, doesn't even begin to describe what happened. Within days, it had been viewed over 1 trillion times across every species' networks. Public opinion shifted so dramatically that corporate shareholders began demanding their companies back down. Protests erupted on 1,000 worlds. Council representatives received millions of messages from their constituents demanding they protect the dragons. The corporations tried to spin it, tried to paint themselves as the reasonable ones just trying to do business. But every time they made that argument, humans would broadcast more footage. Dragons teaching their young ones to fly. Dragon families singing together under the stars. Dragon elders passing down history to the next generation. They made it impossible for anyone to see dragons as anything but people. And once you see someone as a person, it becomes very hard to justify killing them for profit. 3 weeks after the ultimatum, the corporate alliance quietly withdrew their threats. The blockades never materialized. The military action never came. They'd lost the information war so completely that any actual violence would have destroyed their public image beyond repair. But humanity didn't stop there. They pushed for more. Laws protecting not just dragons, but all sentient species not yet recognized by the Council. Stricter regulations on resource extraction in territories inhabited by intelligent life. Criminal penalties for poaching or exploitation of any species showing signs of sentience. 5 years later, Rachel stood on a balcony overlooking the new Interspecies Communication Center on Kepler 442b. The mining colony had been transformed into something beautiful, a place where humans and dragons lived and worked together. The mountains that had once echoed with mining equipment now rang with the harmonics of dragon song mixed with human music. Flint landed beside her, his wings fully healed now, stronger than ever. He'd grown in those 5 years, nearly matching his mother's size. But he still had that same gentle quality, that same patience he'd shown when teaching Rachel his language all those years ago. "Big day tomorrow," Rachel said, leaning against his scaled shoulder. Flint hummed in agreement. Tomorrow they were officially opening the center, a facility dedicated to building bridges between species. Humans and dragons working together to reach out to other civilizations, to find others who might need help, who might be suffering in silence because no one recognized their sentience. Windcaller glided down to join them, landing with the grace that came from centuries of practice. Through Flint, who now served as translator, she spoke to Rachel. "My son tells me you're thinking about that first day again. When you found him dying in the canyon." Rachel smiled. "I think about it a lot. How close we came to losing everything before it even began. If I'd listened to my team, if I'd followed protocols, if I just walked away like I was supposed to." "But you didn't," Windcaller said through Flint's translation. "You knelt in the dust. You made yourself small. You spoke words my son couldn't understand, but your intent was clear. You promised safety and you kept that promise." "We kept that promise," Rachel corrected. "All of us. Every human who stood up in that council chamber. Every person who shared the story. Every colony that declared sanctuary. We all kept it together." Flint made a sound, and Rachel had learned enough dragon language to understand it without translation. "Pride. Gratitude. Love. The galaxy is learning what dragons learned 5 years ago," Windcaller continued. "That humans remember what it's like to be small. To be afraid. To need help. And unlike species who learned compassion from a position of strength, humans learned it from survival. You know what it means to be the underdog, to fight against impossible odds, to win not with power but with persistence and heart." Rachel looked out over the city, watching humans and dragons moving together through the streets, working side by side, living in harmony. This was what the galaxy could be. This was what happened when species chose cooperation over exploitation, when they chose to see each other as people rather than resources. "You know what the best part is?" Rachel said softly. "We're not unique. Humans aren't the only species capable of compassion. We're just the ones who were willing to show it first. Now others are following. 3 more species have declared Dragon Sanctuary. 2 have opened their own interspecies centers. It's spreading." Flint lowered his head so his golden eyes were level with Rachel's. He spoke in English now, words he'd practiced for months to get right. "Because you knelt first. Because you kept your promise. Everything changed because one human saw someone who needed help and refused to walk away." Rachel reached up and touched his scaled snout, the same gesture she'd made 5 years ago when she'd first approached a dying dragon in a canyon. "That's what humans do," she said. "We remember, we care, and we keep our promises. Always." As the twin suns set over Kepler 442b, casting the sky in shades of purple and gold, Rachel thought about how much had changed. How one moment of compassion had grown into something beautiful and lasting. How keeping a simple promise to a wounded creature had changed the entire galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be human. And somewhere in the mountains, dragons sang their evening songs, harmonics carrying across the valleys, celebrating not just their own freedom, but the friendship that had made it possible. The friendship between a human who refused to walk away and a dragon who learned that sometimes, when you're at your most vulnerable, the universe sends you exactly the help you need. You just have to trust enough to accept it.